Well, hey everyone, we are here with David in Virginia, and I'm excited to hear David's questions today. Now, tell me a little about yourself, David, and I know you've got some unique vantage that you're coming at with questions because of your history.
I'm a cantor at a synagogue in Virginia,
Okay.
and as such, I have done more funerals than I can probably count over the past 20-ish years or thereabouts. And
Okay.
I've participated in the Tahara ritual, which is the washing, ceremonial washing and dressing of a deceased in the burial shrouds, casketing, things like that. So I've been in the back room, and for about the past year and a half, I've been working with a removal service
Mm.
that I met the gentleman who owned it a couple of years ago when he did a funeral for one of our congregants. And when I retired, it was something to do that was out of the ordinary. And so, I've only done one home removal. I've done mostly hospital removals and mostly out of town transfers.
Okay.
But obviously, you can say my hands are in the business one way or another.
Okay.
So,
Well, let's go ahead and give me your first question.
okay. I am working with a removal service, and my boss is very caring and concerned with people in our age group and doesn't want us to carry any COVID victims. He says that he's heard that a body can be shedding virus for up to, I think, 5 or 8 days, even after embalming. And your friend, the trade embalmer, in one of your videos about 2 weeks ago, said that formaldehyde was a disinfectant. And
Mm-hmm.
naturally, you always wear PPE because you want to take the most precautions you can,
Right.
but that embalming should make the body to where it is, if not totally safe, a lot safer. So we've all been hearing different information and updated information coming out the past few weeks of this crisis. What's the latest on handling bodies that have been embalmed?
So it's an area that we feel is an industry that nobody's really diving into and studying. There's no large lab that is taking deceased individuals and testing them. So the chatter amongst the group is that a lot of embalmers are trying to get their own testing devices, not like devices, but that they can do some testing to send in to try and get some results. It's obviously not controlled like you would want a study to be, but some data is better than no data. One individual recently tested 2 deceased after embalming. One came back that the COVID was still there. The other was inconclusive. So that's only 2 tests, and it was right after embalming. So whether there's, you wait 12 hours for the chemicals to work, and maybe that will make a difference. There's so many variables, and there's nobody doing enough studying for us to have really any information. At this point, we know that it can be active for a very long duration. There's embalmers who have tested deceased that are in their care for up to 28 days, and the virus is still there. So when people say to us, oh, you guys are safe because, once the person dies, there's no virus, we almost want to laugh because we're like, do you not understand? It's almost kind of a slap in the face, like, no. Like, we then have to really be the ones that are around the individuals, and then also around the families who have maybe been exposed and been in the hospitals, and they're almost more of a threat than the deceased because there's multiples of them. There's more carriers of them. It's getting displaced around the funeral home as they come in. It's then, they go to the bathroom, or they come in an arrangement room. So that to us is a bit scary during the course of it. So there really is just not enough good information to give information. We still are questioning why more autopsying is not being done to really look into how this is affecting the inner workings of a body, why there is not more, dissection and testing of different organs. And we're not understanding why some of that is going on. I'm sure there's an answer somewhere. There's just nobody giving it. And so it's one of those things, it's going to take years, I think, to investigate and really study what this virus has done and will do, what can, make it deactive, how long it lives, all these things. But, when you go on removals and bring somebody into the care of the funeral home, if that body bag has touched something on the outside, around the hospital, you're carrying it on the outside of the bag, not just the deceased on the inside, the outside. So there's, you wheel the cart down the hallway or the cot, that wheel could roll over some active virus that's in the hallway that was expelled as somebody was being moved. So there's just too many hard surfaces that this can live on for a little bit of time or be active on. So yes, as a removal person, whether you're over a certain age, under a certain age, there's definitely a lot of exposure there.
And I guess we're finding out a lot more as the situation goes on, because at first it was cover the mouth and nose and trocar low before you trocar high, and just everybody thought it was in the lungs and stayed in the lungs. And now we're finding it all over the body. And like you say, even picking up something if the cot goes over something in the hospital. So it's,
right.
It's still scary and a lot of unknowns out there.
Very much. Yeah.
Okay.
What's number 2 question?
Okay. When you're embalming, what are some of the things you have to consider, and what choices do you have when you're mixing your solutions, such as how strong to make it or what dyes or what else do you mix? What are some of those decisions you have to make?
I think every embalmer is going to come at it a little different. There are some embalmers who keep a pre-mixed, like, this is my solution and I'm going to use this with 3 gallons of water on every single individual, and that's just what they use. Doesn't matter what the condition is, they just always use the same thing. Others will get out the formula, get out the calculator, do this, and this because they want to get this percentage of a solution. I'm not a numbers person when it comes to that. I go with what I've used, what I know works. I'll make things stronger based on, the condition of the deceased. Sometimes you do waterless, which means you use no water, only fluid. That's going to be obviously your strongest solution. Maybe you use a pre-injection, maybe you use a co-injection to help with clots or to help with jaundice or edema. So, there's some preparation rooms you go in and you don't have a lot of selection when it comes to fluid, where there is no co-injection or pre-injection or specialty fluid. You have one arterial fluid that's 25, index, and that's what you use on every deceased. There's no dye, there's no anything. You have an arterial and you have a cavity, and that's all. So it really just depends on the funeral home and how much they've invested into stocking fluids. But it depends on the embalmer. I'm not a equation, balance out numbers, get this percent, blah, blah, blah type of embalmer. That's just never been how I am, because I'm not a numbers person. I know what I've used and how it reacts with different conditions. And if it doesn't look like it's reacting, I'll do something to make things stronger or to go in different directions. So I think everybody takes a little bit different angle, which is why embalming is really so personal to the embalmer. There's grids and there's diagrams and there's all sorts of things that we can use. But at the end of the day, like, you could have gone by the book of what they said was going to work, but then that body you look at and you're like, what happened? Because that's not the result I wanted. So a lot of it is instinct and just the relationship of, okay, this isn't working. What do I do? Cause and effect and response and such. So did that even answer your question? Sometimes I ramble and I don't even know what I'm saying.
Well, sort of. I know there's all sorts of bottles across that shelf in the back room, and from the things I do there, I don't get involved in that. So I was just wondering, was there a standard when you go in? This is embalming fluid number 1 that you use 95% of the time, and if that doesn't work, then you add.
I think most people will have like a median index, that they use, that it's maybe a 24 it's a 30 or 32, you know, depending on the company, what index, but there's kind of a mid-range. Some like them where they have dye built in, and so it's a cloudier colored fluid, and there's you know, dye, or there's a humectant, kind of like a lotion that's built in the fluid. Some people use that all the time. Some people like the clearer that doesn't have a dye in it because they want to add all their own dye. So, you know, there is a lot of people use one kind of standard fluid, and then they, you know, will add on or vary from there. If it's a decomposition type situation, you may just go for your really high index fluid right off the bat and go for all your specialty fluid. It really depends on the situation. But like you said, I think that most people probably have their go-to, like, this is going to be my base, and then build on from there, unless it's an extreme situation.
And when you said when it's working, do you mean you can observe the preserving effect that quickly, or you mean how easily it flows?
You can see color change, clearing, you know, if there's modeling kind of on the tissue, like blotchiness, it'll start clearing out and you'll get this uniform color. You'll get pinking of the skin. You can see the whole vasculature, that you can watch fluid like go through the veins from the outside sometimes, where it's clearing and turning color. Especially if you use a lot of dye, you can definitely see it happening. So you can kind of pinch the skin and it will stay. It'll get firmer as you're going. Feeling the nose. This is a big to know, because your face, you can embalm and the face will literally split down the middle if there's something disruptive back in the circulatory system up in the head, like the circle of Willis is broken or something in there. You can get a straight line divide where one side is like white and one side is pinked up. It's crazy to see, because you're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? But you just, instead of injecting one side, you inject the other. So you sometimes have to go to both sides, but you can touch the nose here and feel if they're the same firmness in the nostril flares. There's all these little things you just kind of feel around, and just the texture to the skin as you're doing this, or on the knee, like right above the knee, it'll start getting firm where it stays peaked and doesn't go back down. And you know you're getting preservation. You know that fluid is out in the tissues and it's working when it does that.
So how you observe it working tells when you have to go from 1 point to 2 point or more places. And
right. So, you know, if half the face is one color and half is the other, you know, you have to raise something else. Or if a hand is just staying really dark or a different color, then you have to raise another vessel. So, yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. I know how I felt the first time I participated in a ritual washing and dressing, and I was really surprised that I didn't start shaking until after I got out and thought I was touching a dead body. And I know, you know, well, you have to keep in mind, this is not your father. This is not your cousin.
Right.
This is something you're doing, in your case as a job, in ours as, you know, honoring a congregant, showing honor for the deceased. So you kind of keep that in mind to keep the distance and keep the emotion under control. Let me see where I was going with my question on this. The same mindset kind of took over when I started working in removals. And after a while, it's a job. And what worries me now is not, oh my God, I'm touching a dead body. Well, maybe in the COVID situation it would be, but what worries me now is, please don't let this cot collapse. And I never breathe easy until I'm pulling the cot out and I hear that click of the
Yes.
front wheels go down. Or if I'm loading on an unlevel surface, until I see the wheels go up and get caught in the back of a vehicle. So what was it like the first time that you did a removal, or maybe the first time you were by yourself? I always think like, please don't let this person be 280 pounds or something like that.
Yeah, I think when you go into any of the new situations, you almost hold your breath until it's over, knowing that, okay, I didn't mess that up. And you kind of just run on this adrenaline. And then afterwards you're like, oh, what did I just do? And you're almost more exhausted because you're so amped up for it, I guess, not in like a big woohoo, look what I'm doing, but in this, like, I hope I don't mess this moment up for somebody. I I don't remember back to firsts. I don't remember back to a lot of those things when it comes to like removals and stuff. There are situations though where we go into homes where I know it's going to be a big moment. Like I'm going in to get a child, or I'm going in to get, someone, and there's like 50 people in the house and all these eyeballs are on you, or it's maybe a bit, a pillar of the community person that, a lot of eyes are on you. So some of those situations, I still get really nervous if I go into them because I don't know you don't know walking into, I think, especially homes, what you're walking into, where the deceased is going to be, if they're in the bathroom, if they're in that third floor bedroom, if there's going to be dogs laying all over them because the dogs get protected. Like, you just don't know. Going to hospitals and nursing homes, I always hope that I'm not intruding upon other residents with my presence. I try and be as kind walking down the hallways and things because they know what's up. Like, you go to the nursing home, for the most part, you're going to die there, and we're there getting somebody that's already died. And so that's a huge slap in the face mortality kind of situation for all the residents and such. And I know my presence kind of brings that. So I keep a lot of those things, I feel like, in my mind more than the cot and such. I do take a lot of extra precautions. I make sure to knock that thing out. And even if it clicks, I give it one more little tap with my foot because I'm always scared that something is not going to work. I will never be too humble to ask for help. Hey, security guards, hey, nurses assistants, hey, anybody, give me a hand. Because when we go to hospitals, nursing homes and things, it may be just one individual that goes. And like you said, you just never know. Some hospitals have these huge, what is the word I'm looking for? Like
The trays where they go in. And
yeah, all I can think is gully, and that's not even the word at all. But a huge on the tray or on the table that they're on, there's kind of these grooves around the edge because they use those for drainage. If they wash somebody or something else, but sometimes they're so big that as you're bringing a person over, even if they're in a bag and stuff, they get stuck. And so you have to get them out of that little groove onto your table and or onto your cot. And sometimes they don't match up this way. So you're going from a higher table down to your lower cot, or from your higher cot, you're going up, and you just never know what you're getting into. And even if someone's 120 pounds, it doesn't always work to your best advantage if they're bottom heavy, and that booty drags. And there's, you just run into every type of situation. And so until it's all done, I feel like you always kind of hold your breath just a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I know what you mean. Been there.
Yes.
Let's see. I know that you had the experience of growing up. Your mother worked in a funeral home or something, because I know you told about getting a job there as a teenager.
Yeah.
And so it was all very normal to you. But how about some of the people, maybe in your mortuary science classes or so? What were some of the reactions when other people actually hands-on the very first time?
There was, and there is such a range. I was shocked. I figured everybody that went to mortuary school had some background knowledge, or they came from families, or they had done apprenticeships, because I had already done my apprenticeship. I'd worked in a funeral home for years. I didn't realize people just chose to go to mortuary school because it's a shorter program. It's not a 4-year college and then apprenticeship and such. And so people, I think, went for a variety of reasons that put them in the wrong place. And they were a lot of the people that dropped out. They were there because they saw black Cadillacs and they thought funeral directors made a lot of money. And they thought it was a short program and it would be quick and easy to get a degree. But there was people who had never been to a funeral. They had never seen a dead body, like, at all. So first day of lab, it was a little interesting that there's people who'd been embalming with their parents since they were, you know, 12 years old or something. They'd been standing in and, you know, chatting with their dad or mom when they were embalming. So they had all this, like it was commonplace or like anything to them. And people who had never even put their hand on a deceased. So nobody passed out, nobody threw up. Some people did have to step out of the room a little bit just because it is overwhelming, like your senses trying to catch up to what's going on. Aspirating was a very brand new thing because most people don't know about aspirating when it comes to embalming. If they haven't really studied embalming, they know about injecting the fluids, but they don't know the whole aspiration. So we had some wild moments with people using trocars for the first time and not controlling them, and then like flying back out of the body and stuff. So you kind of stepped back when there was a newbie doing the aspirating. But I was surprised with how comfortable some people got very quickly, with how good some people got very quickly. It was just very innate to them. And there's some that had no plan to ever touch a person once they left that school and they were done with their apprenticeship. Like they were just doing that part so they could do the funeral directing part. And they really didn't want to work with the bodies, but it was kind of you had to do one to get the license for the other. And so that's the only reason they were there. And I give them a lot of credit that they went through it, tried it at least, and then made a decision for themselves.
Did any of them drop out when they got hands-on and just couldn't do it?
I don't think anybody dropped out just for that reason that I know of that was in my class. I'm sure over the time there's been lots that have done that. I think we started around 16, we graduated around 40. A lot of it was grades. It's a very rigorous program. A lot of people don't realize how intense it is. It's very equivalent, as a lot of people have said, to medical school, where that first quarter is like the first year of medical school, where you're really trying to just weed out people who are there for frivolous reasons. And so they hit you hard. They hit you hard with a lot of classes, a lot of in-depth chemistry and anatomy and all these things. And so if you can't keep up with the coursework, then, you know, you fall to the side, sadly. But it is quite a rigorous program. And a lot of people are really surprised once they get into it. It's like, are you serious? I have to do all this? Like, this is the stuff we're learning. I thought we just learned how to work with families and this. It's like, nope, you need to have all of these areas covered. And it's quite surprising to a lot of people.
I'd stumbled across an anatomy instructor who gives programs on TikTok. And I had forgotten how many different names of the muscles and veins and the ends of the bones and things that were in anatomy that
yes,
I had a fairly basic science knowledge of from years ago. That, you know, when you go into it, there's a lot more detail.
It gets quite intense. I have time for one more quick question. So,
okay. Well, I really don't have a question. I was going to give some observations that
perfect.
The first time I took a deceased to a state anatomy lab, that I asked what happens thereafter, because I thought in changing the body to making it a cadaver for medical study, I had visions of them soaking it in a pickling tank or so.
Oh.
Because when you see a cadaver, it looks like, I mean, it's hard,
yeah.
solid, and they said, no, we just embalm it, but it's a much stronger solution than the average funeral home would use on a deceased for viewing. And that just surprised me. And the second was in a delivery to a lab. As I was walking out, again, we all have visions of the bodies on tables and medical students around doing their examinations. And instead, I walked by a lab that was just a room full of legs in like braces standing up. And I was told, this is where surgeons practice knee replacements. And it seems I have friends of various ages. All I'm hearing about is knee replacements now. Mine are fine, thank you. And I hope they stay that way. But I guess you just have no idea that that's how surgeons, that's how doctors practice on the things they do. And that's why they're so grateful for donations to the anatomy lab.
Well, and there's, you know, early medical school where you do maybe have a full cadaver that's, you know, for a group of students, but then you have your specialties. So the ENT doctors don't need an arm. They just need a head and, you know, sinuses and everything to work on. The knee surgeons don't need a head. So you get pieced out to the specialties. And I don't, you know, people don't think about that, and maybe people don't care. Just like people want to have a viewing. Yeah, they don't love the thought of the embalming process, but it's one of those, but this is what I want in the end. So I'm not going to think about that middle part. Kind of like giving birth. Like I want the baby, but if I had to think of, you know, having the labor, I'm not going to want to do that. So you have to think about the end goal rather than all the middle steps, because yeah, it's never a beautiful process in the middle per se, but that end goal is what you're going for. And that's, everybody has that choice, what they want that end goal to be. And if it's donation, if it's embalming, if it's tissue donation, whatever it is, it's not going to be for everybody, but that end goal is what your choice is. So I think it's focusing on that.
So many situations where you don't want to know what goes in the sausage, or you don't want to know what goes in the back. You don't want to know what happens in the kitchen of a restaurant.
No, as long as it tastes good. That's what matters to me.
That's
yeah.
Good. Well, it was nice talking to you this morning.
Thank you.
And I enjoyed your videos.
Thank you so much, David. I'm sure I would love to talk to you again about your work at the synagogue and some of that experience, because I have not worked a lot in the Jewish faith, and I would love to know more about kind of what you do there and some of the practices and stuff. And you can teach me all the words that I need to know.
Very good. Very good.
Perfect. Well,
just
thanks, David. I will. I've got your email. I'll hunt you down again now.
Okay. Thanks, and have a good day.
Thanks, you too. Bye, everybody.